Hey y'all, welcome. And I told you there were going to be these little surprises. So I have been in the court all week. And this morning, the court adjourned at 10 o'clock this morning because we have a jury. So I'm just going to kind of run through how that worked so everybody sort of gets a picture of it. First of all, there are two different viewing areas in the courthouse. One in the main courtroom, which is on the fourth floor of the courthouse, and one in the county commissioner's meeting room, which is large and has some capacity. So there are 60 seats that are not reserved for family and witnesses in the main courtroom, and there are another about 200 seats in this overflow room that we were all in all week. So while they were doing jury selection to protect the privacy of the juries, they are the jurors, the potential jurors, they were doing all the questioning in the courtroom, and then they were live streaming the information back to this overflow area. That was because they could move the cameras so they weren't facing the jury and we weren't seeing potential jurors, and also so that they could mute the sound when they were asking more in-depth or personal questions. So it was a little bit of growing pains because the first day the media was complaining about the fact that the sound was being cut off during the questioning of the jurors about media saturation and whether or not they had seen information online or on the news. So the first day, they put out a written transcript of that portion of the recordings. And then for the following days, they only were muting the sidebar conversations the attorneys were having with the judge and any private information that was being discussed with a potential juror. So throughout that process, they looked at all the jury questionnaires. They brought in these groups of jurors, 15 at a time, and then they went through the jury questionnaires and asked additional questions of each one of the potential jurors. So out of those groups of 15, sometimes you get more than half that would be disqualified because of because they had had so much media exposure to the case. Eventually, yesterday at about 5:30, we finally got to the magic number of 42. Now, let me explain how that happened. The judge said he wanted to seat 12 jurors. 12 is always the number for a felony. As six-person juries hear misdemeanors and small claims, not small claims, but smaller civil cases. So they were all, the judge said, sorry, I was trying to do too many things at once. The judge said that he was going to seat 12 jurors and 6 alternates. Now, 6 is a pretty good number considering that as they went through the Murdoch trial, which took 6 weeks, they got down to one last alternate juror. Now, in this case, what the judge has said is that he is going to, the jurors and the lawyers, no one will know who is a juror and who is an alternate. And so out of that 18-person jury pool, they will, by lottery, pick the 12 who will deliberate. That is to encourage all of the jurors to pay attention to everything that's going on and to remain engaged. I think there's it's just sort of human nature to think, oh, well, I'm only an alternate. I probably won't get called to deliberate and space out. So it's probably a pretty good approach to keep everyone engaged during the trial. So we whittled it all down to those 42 people, and here's how the judge got to that 42 number. 18 jurors, so 12 jurors plus 6 alternates, and then the judge permitted 12 peremptory challenges on each side. Now, Idaho statute says that they get at least 10, but the judge does have the ability to increase that. So the judge allowed each side 12 peremptory challenges. Now, the way that worked, it caught some people in the room a little bit by surprise. The way it works is each side has 12 little slips of paper, and they go through their list, and they want to they go through their list and they write down, they prioritize the first person they want to strike, in order. Each side does that, and then they write on their little piece of paper the first person they want to strike. That goes over to the other side, and they swap those so that they can add or subtract those from each list. And then those pieces of paper are sent to the bailiff. Now, there's a reason for this process. It sounds a little convoluted, but the reason is that no one knows who strikes which juror. And the jury is in the room while this process is going on. So they're watching these little notes pass back and forth. And finally, in the end, the judge then called the attorneys up for a sidebar and asked them to confirm for him that he had the right remaining 8 jurors on the list. Everybody confirmed that everybody's list was the same. And then the judge went through the roster and excused 24 jurors. Those 24 jurors, nobody knows whether it was the defense or the prosecution that struck that juror. I will say that juror number 666 was struck, and I think we have a pretty good guess of who that was. Other than that, we don't know. So ultimately, the remaining 18 jurors were given their preliminary jury instructions. They were told to report back at 8:30. I think they were actually told to report back probably about 8:15, because the judge has said he wants to get started right at 8:30 and finish at 3:30 every day. Now, we'll see whether or not he's able to maintain that schedule. It's a little easier when you're hearing witnesses than when you're doing jury selection and some of the other things. So Monday morning, what'll happen first is the jury will be sworn in, and they will be given their opening instructions. Once that happens, then opening statements will happen, and they could be done by lunchtime. They may go over into the afternoon. Once opening statements are done, then we're going to start seeing testimony. The prosecution's going to start putting on their first witnesses. Witness lists have been sealed. The prosecution is not releasing their witness lists the day before, which is a little unusual, but the judge has decided that those witness lists will stay sealed to protect the privacy of the witnesses. Now, oftentimes what happens is witness lists include addresses, phone numbers, birth dates, lots of personal identifying information. And often that information is redacted from the witness list, but witness lists are released. In this case, we're not going to know, so it's just going to be dealer's choice. It is really interesting. I'm going to go for a few more minutes, and then I'm going to take your questions. So it was really interesting that the way that people have been admitted into the courtroom. So we've all been, everybody, all the overflow people, all the media, all the citizens, John Pryor, everybody has been in this overflow room while the jury selection has been going on. So Monday is the first day that people were able to put in a request for a seat in the actual courtroom. As I said, there's only about 60 of those seats. And it is a very competitive and concentrated uh, minute or two when those tickets come up. So the online reservation system opens at 8 a.m. So you have to be logged on and ready to hit send at 8 a.m. The next thing that happens is once all of those seats in the actual courtroom fill, then the people who have not gotten seats in the actual courtroom have to wait until noon in order to put in for the overflow room. The other interesting thing is that in order to discourage people from putting in duplicate requests, if there is a duplicate request, you're disqualified from a seat that day. Now, they have not said whether you're disqualified as well from the overflow room, but it's very competitive. I'm really fortunate that my husband has taken over the job of making sure that he's online at 7:59 and staying online and refreshing until he gets my ticket. I don't know how this is going to work going forward, but we do know that for the first few days, there's going to be a real flurry of people trying to get into the actual courtroom. The overflow room, the video feeds have changed a little bit throughout the week, but initially they had the prosecution's table set up where in front of the judge's bench, and then they had um, the defense. Their table was turned sort of at an angle, at a right angle from the prosecution, and that made it very difficult to see what was going on because it was right in front of a huge window that doesn't appear to have any blinds. And so the light coming in through that window completely washed everything out, and all we really could see were silhouettes. So, and originally they had a camera on the judge, a camera on the prosecution, and a camera on the defense. Well, what they've done is they've now moved the defense counsel's desk. So the defense and the prosecution are just side by side and facing the bench. And there is a camera that on each one. So the way it is set up at this point is you've got prosecution, defense, you can see the judge in the background. Actually, they're facing away from the bench. I don't know how that's going to continue to work once they actually start taking testimony and we have opening statements, but that's sort of the layout right now. So we've also been told that unlike the Murdoch case, where the screens were turned in order to only show the jury most of the documents and most of the exhibits, the gallery will be able to see all of the exhibits and all of the photographs and all of the evidence. So I'm certain there are going to be some very difficult images. I've seen those kind of images before. I understand how to cope with them, but I think it is really difficult for some people. It's going to be very hard, and I'm certain that it will be particularly hard for the families. So, and I'm certain that many of the jurors expressed some concern about being exposed to those kind of images. So Monday morning, we're going to get the jury sworn in, we're going to get opening statements, and then we're off into taking evidence. A lot of people have asked me what Lori looks like. From the overflow room, the images are pretty small. And if you remember back when all the dust up happened about whether or not the judge was going to allow cameras in the courtroom, in part, it was because the cameras were really trained on Lori the way they were on Alec Murdoch. So they've taken, I think, great pains to set the cameras at a bit of a distance from them. So it's a little hard to see her. She's come into court every day in some sort of slacks, a blouse, and a black cardigan. It is a little cool in the courthouse, so I think people have been wearing sweaters. It doesn't surprise me she's wearing a sweater. It appeared yesterday that she was wearing leggings that might have been camo pattern, but remember, she doesn't have access to a wardrobe. Sometimes it's as simple as her lawyers hitting Walmart. Some lawyers and public defense organizations have a client closet where they have collected over the years sort of a selection of potential court outfits for clients, but they're very inexpensive and very limited. So a lot of people kind of made a little bit about the fact that she may have been wearing camo leggings. I'm not sure. It was difficult to tell. The court sketch artist who is working with Nate Eaton and some of the other media reflected that she has a little bit better view because she's viewing the live stream on a screen on a desk rather than viewing it from this great big drop down movie screen. So, oh dear, I don't know how long I may have had my mic muted. However, we're going to press forward. So I'm ready to take questions and we will just move on from there. So drop your questions. Hi, Mary Torbert. Where's the juror entrance for Monday? Is it the same front area as we've seen on your short stories? As far as I know, jurors are coming in through that same entrance because everybody has to come through the metal detectors. Now, I did see Rachel Smith come in through what appeared to be a side door. It may have been a side door that connects to the prosecutor's office. I'm not sure. In a lot of courtrooms, prosecutor's office usually is usually in the same building and may have a walkway or access into the court from a different entrance. But all of the defense attorneys have been coming in through the metal detectors and the same as everybody else. Now, I did see people waiting in line to go through the metal detectors with juror badges on. So I am assuming that they are all coming in through that main front Ada County entrance. I have to give Ada County Court huge kudos. They have done a really good job. I don't think anyone is thrilled with this registration ticketing sort of a situation where the media can't register their credentials and have access to the court as members of the media. Everybody's having to put in for their daily ticket. But absent that, which I'm not sure was completely their choice, the county has been doing a great job. The metal detector lines go smoothly. The folks who are processing people are pleasant and accommodating. If you walk through the metal detector with a coffee or a drink, they give you a drink carrier that goes through the X-ray machine. And they've been very accommodating. There is a desk right outside the overflow courtroom. I'm certain there will be a similar station outside the main courtroom where you check in. They get a list of everyone who has a reservation, and they check your tickets against your reservation. Initially, they were also checking ID. As time went on and the person got to know everybody, she wasn't checking ID anymore, but they also were giving us tickets so that we could get like a pass to get back in. So if you had to go out to the restroom or any of those things, leave at lunch. So Judge Boyce has said he is going to shorten the lunch period because he's not going to be doing other legal matters like judges usually do. Usually, the lunch hour for a trial is about an hour and a half, and that's because the judge is doing other duties for that half hour or 45 minutes before trial starts. So. Hi, Edie Ruth. Will Larry Kay and Kresha be able to sit together? As far as I know, when I was in the main courtroom last week when they were doing the pretrial hearings, they had an area set off with reserve signs that said that I am assuming will be for family and witnesses. So I don't see any reason why Larry Kay and Kresha would not be able to sit together. That said, the court ruled that Kay could be in the courtroom before she gives her testimony, but Larry could not. The judge designated Kay as a family representative for JJ. He also designated Summer Shiflett, who is Lori's youngest sister, as the family representative for Tylee. Now, somebody asked me why they didn't designate Annie Cushing, who is Joe Ryan's sister, Tylee's aunt, uh, paternal aunt. And I don't know the question for that, the answer for that, other than the fact that I don't know that Annie is on the witness list or that she's attending the trial. I had heard and have seen online that she's had some health challenges, so she may just not be able to attend. So, Catlink, I was surprised at the number of no-shows. Is this typical in jury selection for so many to not even show up for the summons? I think it is pretty typical. I actually there were a handful of no-shows and a handful, I think, of people who had already been excused by the jury commissioner. For example, when I was practicing in Bend, Oregon, it's a small jurisdiction, and it it, it was well known that the jury commissioner or the jury coordinator at the courthouse didn't really want defense attorneys on their juries. And moreover, they didn't really want them to show up in the jury pool because there was always that possibility that an attorney could say, this person was in the jury pool. We don't know what she said about the law and about the system. And so we can't use any of that jury pool. So they used to accuse me of tainting their jury pool. So I did get called a couple of times, and when I walked into the jury commissioner, she rolled her eyes and invalidated my summons, and finally put me on a no call list for a jury summons. So I think it is not unusual for there to be no shows for jury summons, and there's usually a mechanism where you can mail in your request for release for whatever reason, and sometimes they cross in the mail or get lost. So I didn't think it was an inordinate number of no shows. Oh, thanks for this question, Living on Love. So when you are putting in for a ticket, it is for the next day. So this morning's ticket was for Monday. So the people who were putting in for the overflow room at noon today will get in first thing into the overflow room on Monday. So the requests for tickets are always at 24 hours ahead. That's a good question. I'm sure that sounded a little confusing. Compassionate RN, hiya. Do you think there will be this much difficulty watching Chad's trial? Hmm. I think that is going to depend on what comes out at Lori's trial. If there's something explosive that might come out at Chad's trial, then we might have this much trouble. On the other hand, I don't think it's all that unusual for someone for a case that's severed, for the co-defendant who's going second, once they get a look at all the evidence, to plead out. So I think there's a 50-50 chance Chad's case won't even go to trial, that he'll plead out. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. Tickle pink music. Could the defense say they want to call Larry so then he would be sequestered again? Annie, so going on. Potentially, but I think it would be seen as harassment. It doesn't. Neither one of Lori's attorneys impressed me as someone who would do that just sort of out of spite or harassment. So I wouldn't expect it. I think he's on the witness list. I think that that the prosecution will probably call him pretty early, just to make sure that he can be in the courtroom with Kay and Kresha. Why Summer? She didn't do anything for the kids and was part of the cult. Jennifer M., I do not have an answer. That administrative hearing was was not open to the public. And so all we have is the recording and the judge's written explanation. So I think that he believed that a family member could be designated as an advocate for the victims. And I think by process of elimination, basically, he moved down to Summer. It may have been selected by the prosecution. Once again, though, I want to point out that it was the prosecution's job to submit to the court who they believed were immediate family or victim representatives. And they did not do that, and they still have not done that as of today. The judge made that point. So it's just one more little thing that was overlooked in the prosecution's work. And that's concerning for anybody who's watching this trial. It's concerning to see that the prosecution is missing things that are falling through the cracks. So what we know about the jury, okay, Kathleen Curtis, why do we need Archibald and Thomas now the death penalty is off? Let me get to that. What we know about the jury is that of the 18 people who are jurors and alternates, there are 10 men and 8 women. So that was an interesting makeup, particularly since it seemed like there were more women than men in each individual panel. So I didn't keep exact track of each 15-person panel that came in. Some people did. I think Gigi has it, but I didn't keep track of it. Why do we need Archibald and Thomas now the death penalty is off? Well, Archibald and Thomas are not exclusively death penalty attorneys. They are death penalty qualified, but they handle complex felonies of all kinds. They are court-appointed attorneys who also are death penalty qualified, but who handle any number of complex felonies. So even though the death penalty is off the table, they're still appropriate attorneys. Plus, they have been working on this case for a year. It would be crazy it would have been crazy at the point that the judge took the death penalty off the table for them to have to get new lawyers. There's no way that they could have respected her request for a speedy trial. So, good question. O'Dagan? O'Dane. What are the four main points you would want to hammer home with the jury in opening statements? Oh, this is a good question. I think depending on whether you're defense or prosecution, but I think that opening statements are the roadmap to the case. Now, closing arguments really are driving home to the jury this piece of evidence proved this element of the crime. And because this piece of evidence proved that element, we approve beyond a reasonable doubt you should convict her. So there is certainly an argument part of closing arguments. Opening statements, in contrast, are usually a roadmap to evidence because evidence doesn't always come in chronologically. It doesn't always come in a way, it can come in bits and pieces. And so it's always important to give the jury a roadmap, and that usually is a narrative kind of a story. Really kind of hitting home the structure, the skeleton of the story, and being able to give the jury the story from your perspective. So oftentimes you will hear something that is much more narrative form than you'll hear in closing arguments. In closing arguments, you will get, here's the statute, here's the evidence that proved it, here's the statute, here's the evidence that proved it from the prosecution. And then you will get from the defense, here's what the prosecution said, and here's all the way we're poking holes in that argument. So opening and closing are very different. Lecelle de Beer. Question, do you think the prosecution is really prepared for this trial? It seems like they aren't. If not, do you think Lori will go free? I think the prosecution is prepared enough to put on a case and potentially prove beyond a reasonable doubt. I don't think Lori will go free. I do think that the appellate courts may find reasons to grant her a new trial. So in order for Lori to go free, the jury would have to find that she is not guilty. And that means not guilty of any of the charges that she is charged with. So if they prove that she's guilty of conspiracy to murder Tammy, but they can't prove that she was guilty of conspiracy to murder the children, it's still a conviction. She still gets a murder conviction. So if she gets convicted of any one of those charges, she's done for. However, I do think that there have been issues that have come up during the pretrial, and most certainly will come up during the trial, that could very well cause the appellate court to grant her a new trial. So that would not surprise me at all. I don't think she's going to go free. I think there is sufficient evidence to prove that she conspired to commit these murders. And I want to caution everyone that while we saw these big data dumps from Arizona, we have seen none of that from Idaho, because Idaho's Freedom of Information Act statute excludes information before a trial. So we won't get any of that information until trial. So I suspect there is sufficient evidence to prove the conspiracy. Thank you for your donation to our moderators. I do want to remind everybody that everything that you donate, either by Super Chat or PayPal, goes directly to our moderators. You can, however, buy me a coffee, and I have appreciated being fully caffeinated going to the courthouse every day. So thank you so much for all those who have bought me a coffee. Do we know if Colby Ryan will be testifying for the prosecution? We don't know because we're not privy to the witness list. We assume that he is on the prosecution's witness list because the prosecution said he is immediate family. So we just have to jump to the conclusion that he's likely on their witness list. What about Rachel Smith? Why is she still on the case since the death penalty is not being sought? Is she under contract with Madison County? She absolutely is under contract with Madison County. And she is continuing to provide advice, I think, and guidance to prosecutors, both of whom are not very experienced and have never tried a murder case. So even though the death penalty is off the table, she is certainly there to provide guidance and advice going forward. She is being paid by Madison County, I believe. It may be a combination of Fremont and Madison both, but she is being paid by the prosecution in both counties, or prosecutor's offices in both counties. And her fees are not inexpensive. The last I heard, her contract included $6,000 a month plus travel and accommodations. And it could be more for trial. Barley Cups. I hope so much that someone got Kay into the courthouse. I wonder if folks all over the world would sign up and transfer to them now and overwhelm the system doing such. Well, that's a great thought, but please, let's not conflate these two things. First of all, the court has found that Kay is a representative, a family representative of JJ. And as such, she is immediate family and she can be in the courtroom even before she has testified. So Kay has unlimited access to the courtroom. Second, none of the family members are having to put in for this lottery tickets. They have a section reserved in the courtroom for family and witnesses. So don't panic. Kay will be in the courtroom from day one. Larry, who is also on the witness list, was found not to be immediate family. He can be in the courtroom during opening statements, but he will have to sit out once testimony starts until he testifies. Once his testimony is taken, he can come back and be in the courtroom with Kay and Kresha the whole time. So I don't think anybody needs to sign up and transfer anything to Kay and Larry. They have a guaranteed spot in the courtroom. And Kay has a guaranteed spot for the entirety of the case. So that has been ruled on and determined. As far as I know, Kresha is not on the witness list and so can be in there for all of it. Larry will have to sit out until he testifies. But there is room set aside for them. They do not have to compete for a spot in the courtroom. That is all just us folks who are not family members, even though we might feel like it at this point. Brenda Robson. Could Lori still put in a plea deal? Absolutely. I have seen cases where halfway through a trial, a defendant took a plea. So it could happen. That would require the prosecution to continue to extend the plea offer through the trial, which typically the prosecution will say to the defense, we're withdrawing our plea offer once the jury is impaneled. So she could. I don't expect that she will. I think she's, to be honest, I think she's enjoying this too much. She's definitely the center of attention. She's definitely conferring very actively and engagingly with her two attorneys. So I don't expect that she will. Now, I do have a pound of coffee riding on whether or not she'll take the stand. That will be interesting to see. KCL says, I think first witness on the stand will be Kay Woodcock. If the prosecution presents the case in the order of events, it would make sense she would be first. Then Larry soon after, maybe with law enforcement in between. Well, I agree that if they're going to be presenting the story chronologically, that Kay would be up on the stand early. And it could all be moot. Kay and Larry could be on first. We don't know because the prosecution's not providing us with their witness list. And there is a strategic reason for putting witnesses on in certain orders. So we'll have to wait and see. Chrissy J, do you think the jury will be confused by the religious cult aspect of the case? I don't think so. The jury was asked by the prosecution if you heard that someone had a religious belief that seemed odd or was very different than your own, would you be able to set aside your own beliefs and not convict someone because their religion's weird, basically? They said it a little more artfully than I just did. However, that was the question. And there actually was one juror who said, I think I would have a problem with that. If that person's religion were so opposing of mine, I would have a problem with that. And he was struck. He was actually dismissed for bias, for cause yesterday. So the questions did come up. We don't know how in depth those questions were in the private sessions, because in the private sessions, they were asking potential jurors things like, personal experience with crime, personal loss of a child, religious questions, things that people may not have been overly comfortable talking about in open court. We did have a couple of people that they questioned about their exposure to the news and the internet. One guy said his wife was a true crime nut, and when he got called for jury duty, she couldn't stop talking about this case, and the judge released him, but not without apologizing to him for making it hard for him to go home that night. So there were some light moments in the jury selection, not many, but a few. One guy who said, my wife will not stop talking about true crime, even though I hate it. So we'll see. It appears that they were able to weed those folks out, and as well as some people who are related to law enforcement and some other folks. So good questions. Any other questions? If we don't have any other questions, hello, Chrissy J. Oh, we got that one. If you don't have other questions, I will let you know that I am live tweeting from the courtroom on my little laptop. I have been sitting next to Gigi from Pretty Lies and Alibis. I had the great good fortune of meeting Leah Sotilli, who wrote the book called When the Moon Turns to Blood. and which is in part about this case. Leah's take on it is much more um, focused on extremist groups and extremist beliefs. She heavily covered the Ammon Bundy story and the Ammon Bundy case. And so her book is much more focused on religious extremism. The Bundys were also members of the LDS Church, and it's clear that at some point there was some uh, influence there with them, the John Birch Society, a lot of that information. So I had the great fortune to get to know her. She was at trial this week and will be back over on Monday. And also got the chance to attend a reading of her book yesterday after court. So I recommend her book. It's very interesting. It will be very different from mine. So I think this is a big tent and there's plenty of room for everybody, just like there's plenty of room for all of us YouTube creators. So I did get the chance to sit with Gigi, Nate Eaton from East Idaho News, Justin Lum from Fox 10 Phoenix are there. John Pryor has been sitting in on as much as he has time for. And there are a lot of other local news folks that are there. So it's been interesting to meet all those people face to face. Question from Hannah RN. If Chad's case doesn't go to trial, as you guessed it might not earlier, would that be because he pleads guilty? Yes, it would be because he takes a plea. Now remember, he is he still has the death penalty, even though it was taken off for Lori. He's still facing the death penalty. And I think that may be the reason for him to take a deal. What do you think Pryor gleaned from sitting in this week? And could he insist on cameras for Chad's trial? Well, he could insist all he wants on cameras, but according to the Idaho legislature, it is the trial judge and only the trial judge who gets to make that decision. And it is not appealable beyond the trial judge. So if you don't agree with the trial judge's decision, you can't take it to the Supreme Court. There's no authority for that in the statute. So as to what he gleaned from sitting in this week, I think what he gleaned was the prosecutor's process and trying to sort of handicap the race, if you will. I mean, trying to understand from their questions what their thought process is and what kind of jurors they're looking for. So didn't surprise me at all that he was there, and I'm sure that he will be in court throughout most of the trial. It would be foolish for him not to. Hi, Trisha the trucker, you're in Wyoming. Were they not allowed to specifically ask potential jurors if they were LDS? I believe that they were able to specifically ask that question, and they probably did it in private sessions. Now, here's the thing. You cannot, under a US Supreme Court ruling, you cannot use your peremptory challenges, your no reason strikes, to exclude a juror because of their race, their gender, or their religion. But that doesn't mean that you can't exclude them because there are other factors involved. So, you're free to say to someone, are you familiar with the LDS Church? Well, yes, I'm a member. Oh, well, if you're a member, let me just ask you some questions about, have you heard about this case? Are you worried that it's going to reflect poorly on your religion? And, I think that once you determine that fact, you can pull out from the potential juror possible things that possibly could make them biased one way or the other. So I do believe that they were asked. It was either on their questionnaire or it was in their private sessions, because the questionnaire was very large, and that was in part because the entire witness list of something like 300 witnesses was included in the jury questionnaire. That's not typical. Typically, what happens is somebody stands up and reads the list of all of the potential witnesses, but that didn't happen in this case. In this case, it was put into the jury questionnaire. It's sealed. We won't see it, and I suspect that that question was in the jury questionnaire as well. And then they probably weren't following up with anybody who marked the no box. Be safe out there, Trisha the trucker. I know the weather's been really bad in the Midwest and out into the Mountain West, so be safe out there. Hi, Boston girl. Can the same witness be called more than one time, or is it just reserved for experts? No, the same witness can be called more than one time. And sometimes what happens is the prosecution calls that witness, and then the defense calls the witness as well. Because each side may be trying to get out information that didn't come out on the other side's direct. So the prosecution may want to tailor their conversation to these facts, and the defense may say, the fact I really needed to have come out didn't come out, so I'm going to call that person on direct and ask that question. Additionally, they can call rebuttal witnesses, so people can be called back as rebuttal witnesses. I want to point out, while we're waiting for the next question, that we have a Facebook group. It is called The Good Lori, and my mods are reposting the live tweets in that group. For those of you who don't tweet, I've heard a lot from a lot of folks that they don't use Twitter, and so if you want to see those live tweets, our mods are putting them up as soon as they come up in Twitter into that group. It's up on the screen now if you want to join us. And I'm telling you what, when court's going on, all you can hear is a bunch of clattering keyboards as people are frantically typing. Hi, Lindsay Jane. Should Chad get the death penalty, will he qualify for firing squad as his trial hasn't been set yet? Yes, it's likely that he would qualify for the firing squad because the penalty phase would happen after the firing squad legislation came into effect. Hey, Chrissy J. Will they have to wait till Chad's trial is over before they can release the children for burial? If yes, that's heartbreaking. You know, that is going to be entirely up to the prosecution. I think you all have heard me say before that I thought that it was unnecessary and that it was a degree of caution that was probably not reasonable. I think that they probably had all the information that they needed from the children's bodies, and it would be appropriate to release them. I am hoping that they will release them after Lori's trial, but it's completely up to the prosecution at this point, and they have been adamant that they do not want them released because they're afraid that the defense is going to ask for an independent autopsy. Hi, KCL, back again. I wonder if John Pryor will be ready for trial soon after this case is over. I'm sure. I mean, if he's attending the trial every day, he's not doing his own trial preparation. But that does mean that his mitigation specialist and investigator are continuing to work on the issues that they need to work on to go forward with trial. So I expect that he will be ready and certainly will be ready when the court resets his trial. He asked for a date next spring, sort of pie in the sky. I think Chad's trial is more likely to be set in the fall and winter of this year. Drinking my orange juice. And there isn't even any vodka in it. Carol Hoover, question. Lori, are you concerned that by telling us all about the trial that people might not want to buy your book because they think they know everything? I will buy your book, by the way. Well, here's the thing. I think that people are interested in an in-depth book because you're much better able to synthesize some of the things that have happened into a whole global picture. Remember that the trial is going to focus on relevant information that is relevant to her conviction. And there's a whole lot, a universe of information out there about this case that may not be relevant directly to her conviction. So I'm not concerned about that because I think people will understand that the trial itself may be 50% of the whole story, because a lot of information that might be hearsay, might be just simply not relevant, will be in the book. For example, at the trial, they will very likely not be discussing Charles's murder at all. Because if you remember from the Murdoch case, we had this whole issue about whether or not the evidence of prior bad acts under 403B came in. And so I don't believe the court's going to let anything in having to do with Charles's murder. Probably won't, may let things in having to do with Alex Cox's death to explain why he's not a co-defendant. But I don't think we're going to hear anything about what happened in Arizona. I would be surprised if the jury even hears that there are Arizona charges. So the way that the story all comes together in a cohesive, synthesized manner, that's what happens in the book, not in the trial. Good answer, though. And thanks for offering to buy the book. Thank you, Carmen. She says, I'm buying the book. I mean, I will be buying it. So my hope for all of you who haven't heard about CrimeCon is a true crime convention, just like Comic Con and all those things. Who knew? I didn't know till last year that there was such a thing. So it happens once a year. It moves around the country. Last year it was in Las Vegas. This year it's in Orlando, Florida. And next year, we don't know yet. So my hope is that we will have the book out and be doing a big push and a big launch at CrimeCon in 2024. Books don't happen quickly. So I promised my publisher that I will have an initial manuscript to them 6 months after the trial is finished. And that is a really ambitious time frame. I am hoping that Chad's case is set and finished before the end of the year, and that I'll be able to wrap up whatever happens in Chad's case into the final book. And then what happens is the manuscript goes to the publisher and the editors go through it. We kind of go back and forth on copy edits and on maybe rearranging things. My plan is to send chapters as they're ready to my editors so that we won't be editing all at once. But there will be times that there will be people doing edits of the whole book. And then the process is it has to go to production, and there has to be a cover designed, and all of those pieces have to come into play before the book actually hits the shelves. So it is a lengthy process, and there will be some advanced publicity and marketing that's going to happen, and I hope a big kickoff at CrimeCon, and so I know it's going to try everyone's patience. They're going to be, drumming their fingers, wanting it to be done. So we're working on it. I am working on it diligently. I spent the whole summer doing research. I have spent as much time as I possibly can doing things in advance, but really until at least the first trial's over, I can't really dig in earnest. Hi, Jennifer M. Yes, I believe there will be an audiobook. No, I will probably not be narrating it. Leah Sotilli narrated her book and did a wonderful job. I'm not sure I'm a great narrator, so I'd be happy to have somebody else do it. And I've talked to authors who have narrated their own books, and it can be a challenge. It's pretty grueling work, so I'd be okay if somebody else does it. Hi, Diane. I will absolutely be planning book signings everywhere that will let me go and sign books. I certainly will be doing it in the Boise area and the Idaho area, because the case has been of such huge interest, and I'm living here. So yes, I will absolutely be planning as many book signings as people will let me come and sign books. We have hit the 1 hour mark. And I know that I appreciate you all hopping in on a Friday. We have 528 people in chat. Thanks so much for popping in on Friday afternoon when there's so much else going on. Please catch me tonight. Harvard lawyer Lee, I'll be on her show tonight at 7 Eastern, I think. We'll get the link out to everybody because we want everybody to be able to join us. So please join us for that. And then tomorrow, 6 o'clock Pacific, 7 Mountain, we will be doing a 2-hour update on what's been going on in the trial for anybody who didn't get all your questions answered in today's live or couldn't make it. We'll see you tomorrow. I'm going to say adios for now, and we will be talking on Saturday, and I'll be back in court live tweeting on Monday. Thanks all for coming in.